No Purpose Without Love is a podcast dedicated to helping you find purpose through the relentless pursuit of God's love. The unfortunate reality is that we are born into a world that does not know God. Since God is synonymous with love, to be without God is to be without love. This podcast aims to bring light to the dark areas of your life so that you gain a deeper connection with love as a person, more affectionately known as Jesus. Jesus spoke often about the kingdom of God, and in the kingdom, love is the why behind everything that exists, including our purpose. I am your host, Dave Guerreso, and my hope and prayer is that you will experience the overwhelming love of God so powerfully that you will become love to a world that is still very much without love. God has given me the ability to provide the spark, but He wants to fan into flames the purpose that He has for you, which always leaves a trail of breadcrumbs leading right back to our Father and Creator. Please remember to follow this podcast to continue receiving notifications about new episodes as they're released. Now let's get fired up. Hello and welcome once again to the No Purpose Without Love podcast. I am your host, Dave Guerreso. Here we learn to lead well, live on purpose, and honor God with our lives. Today I have with me Mr. Joe. Joe's mission, Joe Miner's mission as a business coach is to empower individuals and organizations to achieve their full potential. Drawing from over 30 years in manufacturing management, he brings a unique perspective to the world of coaching, helping businesses thrive through effective leadership, strategic planning, and operational excellence. Joe has been married to his wife for 39 years and has 3 children and 6 grandchildren. In his spare time, he enjoys bass fishing tournaments and spending time with family. Joe, welcome to the show. Appreciate you having you on today.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So why don't you open up by just telling us the story on how you moved from the manufacturing industry from about 34 years, from what I understand, to becoming a business coach. What was that like?
So it was kind of a long transition because it was years I had been, wanting to help people, wanting to help businesses. I've had a lot of instances where, I've heard stories of small businesses and had friends in small businesses and their struggles. And just as I'm going through working for other people, there's sometimes they listened to my advice and sometimes they didn't listen to my advice. And I just knew there's lots of ways I could help people. And after years of kind of searching and learning and striving, then it just eventually kind of fell into my lap, this program of becoming a business coach and a Christian business coach is that. And so I can now, I have the format and the ability to be able to, help small businesses and, well, any business I could, as far as taking my experience and my training. And I continue to learn. That's one thing that I learned a long time ago. But
so one of the things I take from that, Joe, is there's a high element of intentionality. And also you recognize that you're taking all this in, right? And you're gaining all this wisdom, all this experience, and all of a sudden your mind goes, wow, like there's a whole lot I have here that can actually flow through me and that can be shared with others to help them excel. And I commend you for that. And I think that's awesome because not a lot of people, in my experience, do that. Right? They might just hold it in, go with the motions, but that's not who you are. You took all that wisdom and experience and you turned it into something. What was the thing that pushed you over the edge and made you go, you know what? I need to make an intentional effort to really start getting out there and letting people know what I have to offer.
Well, it's I don't know that I can say there was really any particular thing that just pushed me over the edge. It was more of a gradual nudging. It's like you think of if you have dogs, how they'll just kind of nudge you until you move, right? Yeah. To go play with them or whatever the case may be. But that's just what I kept getting nudged until where finally I just needed to get out and help people, help businesses.
And that's interesting because I find that's how God tends to move in our lives, right? We're it's not an overnight thing. I mean, for some, very rarely it does happen, right? But I find in my own experience as well that as things begin to change and evolve in my life, it is these small little nudges that happen. And that's a good analogy with the dog too. So,
Right.
so speaking of, Joe, what role has being a follower of Jesus played in your journey so far?
I think, we have ingrained within us, we have we want to help people. There's just one of the, I want to back up a little bit here. One of the things that really kind of gets me when I hear people talk about, society today, talking about wanting to make, you should be happy or something like that. And I think we really get true fulfillment when we're serving people and you get that completion of helping people and being satisfied with being able to do that. And I think that's what really drives us. And I think that's really what the way the Lord really helps me, in getting that fulfillment feeling from helping people.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that because I go back several years, right? And I remember this time when I was in a dark place. And I remember leaning into God a little more and wanting to figure out, like, how do I find my way out of this? But what ended up happening is I started seeing a world of people around me when I went to work every day at the day job. And people were hurting, people were struggling, people were looking for encouragement. And I started realizing, just like you did, Joe, I have a lot to offer. I have some of my own experience and wisdom to share. And I began just doing that, just a tiny bit each day. And that little bit brought me to life. And I literally watched the faces of others change because of it. And I don't know if you've had a similar experience.
Yeah. And yeah, this when you're helping somebody or encouraging somebody, or you just have the right questions that leads them into where you see the light bulb comes on and they have their ideas. It really does have that kind of experience in that way. I truly get enjoyment when other people are successful.
Absolutely. There's a reward in it. So I want to go back to the subject of nudges. One of the cool things that I realize about life in general is God will often use the things that we enjoy most, like in your case, bass fishing, to teach us and create those little nudges. He shows us things and reveals new things throughout our years while we're doing the things that we enjoy. So what types of things has bass fishing taught you about life and business and family throughout your years?
So yeah, bass fishing, yeah, I've had a number of times where it's been fairly successful. But most of the time when you're out fishing, one of the things that God teaches me is humility. Things just don't seem to go the way you want, but it really helps me. I mean, first of all, being outdoors is just you feel so much more connected with God just because He's the one that designed everything, and you see the beauty and you see the wildlife, and it's just pretty amazing. There was one time I was fishing a regional tournament and out on Lake Erie, and it was really one of those calm, smooth, and just going 70 miles an hour towards the sunrise for 45 minutes was just really amazing. Just you can't even put it into words. And my boater, the first thing he said to me, he goes, how can anybody believe in evolution after watching that? It was just amazing to me. But yeah, definitely teaches me humility, but also that, it's like putting the pieces of a puzzle together when you're out there trying to figure out where the bass are, what are they going to bite, how am I going to get them to bite. It really helps me realize how you do have to be intentional in trying to come up with a plan, and that you have to often deviate from what your original plan is, from what you've learned in their responses. So the fish will tell you what they want.
Yeah, the term often used out there is fail forward, right? You
Right,
make your mistakes and then you pivot.
right, for sure.
It's pretty much how everything works. But I hear you talking too about creation
Mhm.
and humility, but creation, that one caught my attention because I love how you described how there's just no words really to express. Because I think creation and the beauty of it is one way God expresses his love toward us. And interestingly, we're co-creators with him. So when we do the things that we do and we use our gifts and the talents, even when it comes to coaching, we ultimately create possibilities for people. And it is a way for us to express love to others in the same way. But what an amazing thing that we get to receive that kind of love from God. And one of the coolest things that I've heard, and it hit me like a ton of bricks when somebody said this: God loves us so much that even if you and I were the only people on the planet, he would have created all that for us anyway. Right. And
Right.
when you realize that that's true, and you drive down the street and you're doing the 70 miles an hour straight into the sunrise like you're describing, it's like you realize in that moment, that's for me. That's not just for everyone else. It's also for me. And when we get to receive love on that level, how much more that fills us up and enables us to go out there and do it for others. So it's a beautiful picture. Just going back to that again too, right? With the bass fishing, the humility and the need to learn from that. Like how has that helped you in business?
Well, just the whole thing about always having to adjust and always having to learn. It's just like when you're marketing, for example, and if you put an advertisement out there, you compare your responses to this other advertisement, and you have to adjust and tweak. And it just seems like everything along the way is a learning process. But I don't know. It just seems like it seems like I keep using this illustration about putting a puzzle together, and that's what you gotta get the pieces to fit, and then the more and more you get fit together, the more and more you can see the vision. So yeah, that's why I think a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is kind of like a puzzle, right? And
Mhm.
it's funny because I had an interview with Rob Duhamel, and he and I talked about Soren Kierkegaard's quote that life is better understood backwards.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think it was Rob that I talked to, but in any case, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? And when you talk about puzzle pieces, that's kind of how I see it. And we don't often realize that we're handling a puzzle piece in the moment until we look back and go, oh, I see how that piece fits into this piece. If I wouldn't have gone through that, I wouldn't be able to get through where I'm at right now. Right. The
Right.
tools of yesterday are often what we need to get through today. Right. And so
Right.
that's key.
Right.
So let's talk about leadership for a second. Like why like I know that's something that's important to you. Why
Mhm.
is leadership so important? And how does that extend even beyond just the business realm into other parts of your life?
Leadership. Yeah. So it just leadership is really like I don't know, it's kind of a natural thing, but at the same time it's like to be a good leader you got to be a good follower. It's just one of those things that's kind of amazing to me. Whether it be, whether you're in business following a leader, or whether it's in your spiritual life and following Jesus. It just, to me, it's important because I know that that's the only way to really kind of impact people, and to lead them well. And that's one thing that John Maxwell says is everyone needs to be, or deserves to be, led well. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. That's in the whole idea about being a follower. I think John talks about this as well, being a river, not a reservoir. And
right.
so
Yeah.
things that, flow through us. there's nothing that we receive that's not meant to ultimately pour over onto others. And this is a really cool analogy too, right? Is that if you keep filling a cup of water and you get it to the brim where the water's just kind of sitting right there on the top, and you begin to walk it across the room, and let's say one of your grandkids runs by and bumps right into you, what's going to happen, right? Whatever's overflowing out the top of that cup is going to probably spill out onto them. And so the real question becomes, what are you putting into the cup? And I'm saying this, right, because you brought up being a follower, right? And easy to say, like, look, I'm receiving that love from God, but I'm also receiving that love from others that are pouring into me. Those things begin to fill up my cup, so that when we're leading others, when we're doing what John is saying, that everybody actually deserves to be led, we have that same opportunity to allow those things to flow through us. But it's that cup, right, that's filling up from the others that are pouring that love and that wisdom into us. That's what's going to ultimately spill over once we begin to lead others, right? And I think that's
Right.
where the whole connection between being the follower or the receiver connects to being the leader or the giver.
Right. Right.
So good stuff. So in what ways does your coaching help businesses and individuals? You talk about strategic planning, operational excellence, and of course, leadership. In what ways, or maybe you can just offer some quick tips right now, like what are some steps that businesses and individuals today can take to start implementing those types of strategies into what they do?
Well, kind of like when we originally started talking about being intentional, intentionally and focusing on things, one of the things I really try to start with is the profit and loss statement. And that's because there are only certain things you can control and certain things you can't. You can control the revenue, and your expenses and your overhead expenses, well, your cost of goods sold and your overhead expenses. And being intentional and looking at that and going through and breaking it down. And so in doing that, then they get more profit. And when they have more profit, then they have more choices of what they can do. You can put it into the business, expand more. Maybe they can put more training or development into their employees. That's one. But I think it's so key is be intentional. I think so many times we as business owners, right, tend to kind of let things happen to us, instead of us being intentional and making the changes necessary to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Intentionality is everything, right? Because
Right.
life certainly can happen to you if you let it.
Right. Right, for sure.
What excites you most about this work that you do?
Well, it's just seeing people being successful, being able to help and have a part. That's what really excites me most. Just being able to help them and being part of it, and seeing them grow. I mean, that's what really excites me about that.
Yeah. So I hear a lot of compassion, right? And so I want to bring this into the conversation too, because we talk a lot, in our culture in general about things like empathy, right? But then there's actually three different types of empathy. There's cognitive empathy, which is just that part of you that begins to understand where another person is. And simply defining empathy is really putting yourself in another person's shoes. But the cognitive part or the mental part of it is understanding it. The emotional part is feeling it with them, but that it's the compassion that ultimately compels us to move into doing something, taking an action to serve or help them in some way. And that's kind of what I'm picking up from you, Joe. So tell me your thoughts on this idea of compassion and how that, really helps motivate you to move into serving others in this way.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just really do feel, for them when they're struggling. And I think that's just some of the things that it's kind of a natural thing for me to try to help them out of that situation. And I'm not sure how else to express what compassion is, since it is kind of natural for me.
Do you find yourself just sort of sitting with it at times? Like, Is that kind of the direction? Do you find yourself just wanting to sit with the issue, listen, right, and ultimately go from there? Because that's, in my experience, that's kind of how it starts, right? Is
Mhm.
actually being able to receive that and be with somebody. The listening thing too is key, right?
Mhm.
Because if we're not doing a good job, like we hear things, but do we really listen? Do we really take it in?
Right.
And so I feel like one of the first steps to moving compassionately towards somebody is to actually give what I would think is our most precious resource, which is our time. It's not the money, it's not the things that we have or the things that we own. It's our time, because it can't be replaced, right? So to be able to invest that time into another person, hear out their issues, and then move toward action, like that's the beginning of it.
Right. Right. Yeah. For sure, because there's a term out there called active listening, and
Yes.
and I'm not sure of the definitions or anything, but I know it's really hard when you've got multiple things going on. But there is many times I get caught up into listening to where I like, or they'll ask, I'll be listening so well that it's like I can't remember what I was going to say next.
Oh yeah.
you know,
Right.
I
Yep.
that tends to happen to me a lot. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I hear you on that.
Mhm.
Sometimes I got to take notes on what's coming in, because it can be a lot. But at the same time, I realize that what gets said is often what needs to be said, right? And
Mhm.
it's
Right.
it's just getting into the nitty gritty of those conversations, right? It's okay to miss something. I think I remember this one experience that I had years ago where somebody had asked me a question. I gave a certain answer, and then I thought about it after I hung up the phone and said, I should have said X, right? And I didn't. And I actually called that person back and said, hey, I should have said. And one of the ways they responded was, you know what, Dave, what you said was exactly what needed to be said. And that stuck with me years later, because there was a huge message in that sometimes we beat ourselves up, we put all this pressure on ourselves to say more than needs to be said, but sometimes it's just actively listening that's all people really need, and very few words. Or there's this other quote that I've heard, right, that I preach the gospel as often as I possibly can, and sometimes I use words. And so you see that sends a
Yeah.
real strong message right there. So I think you're
Right.
on to something, right?
Right.
It's not about being the smartest person in the room or having the most things to say. It's sometimes it's just about showing up.
Yeah, showing up and asking questions, and with the we can figure this out attitude.
Absolutely. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. Right, you
Okay.
you have been married almost 40 years. That is a big deal. So those who listen to me on this show know that I don't take that lightly, and I'm always looking to pull out the insights and the wisdom from those types of situations, those types of marriages, because it takes a lot to get there. I've been married over 20 years myself. I know what I've been through in those 20 years. I can only begin to imagine what another 20 will bring. So share with us some wisdom, Joe. What is it that you and your wife have done to create this awesome, successful marriage with 3 adult children and now 6 grandchildren?
So, you kind of take one day at a time, because it doesn't happen, over a blink of an eye, right? So, but the other, what I lost my train of thought where I was going to go with that. So I think really, because you hear people say communication's the key, but I think it's just that both of us have the same idea that there's no plan B, there's no out. It's like we both have the commitment that there's no other choice in the matter. We're gonna solve this, whatever comes our way. There has been some really difficult times, and some good times too. But yeah. we like to spend time together, and that's key also, I think, too.
I've heard before from those who've been married a lot longer than me that laughter is a huge thing in marriage. Like if you learn to laugh together, it heals a lot of wounds.
Yeah, yeah, and we do, of course. I think a lot of times my I'm told I have dad jokes, kind of kind of humor, but there's sometimes I can really make her laugh. Yeah.
Yeah, the dad jokes are key. Sometimes my kids will listen to a bunch of them on with like videos, or we've read them in books. we have we have a lot of fun as a family sometimes reading the dad jokes, which is ironically I just find them a whole lot more funny than my wife does. But yeah, I guess that's because I'm a dad.
Yeah, there were times around the table dinner time with when the kids were still at home that we yeah, there was times when we couldn't stop laughing. So,
Yeah, you have a bad
yeah,
case of the giggles. That doesn't go
right.
away. Well, let me ask
Right.
you a little bit more of a serious question, Joe. Like when you get stuck, right? Because I love what you said about no plan B, right? It's plan A is we're getting through this thing. It's till death do us part. But when you find that you're stuck and you're like, I don't know how to move past this, how do you navigate that for the younger couples out there? How do you navigate that?
Well, I guess it depends on how if it's something, we've always been able to work it out together, just talking about it. But if somebody hasn't been able to do that, then they need to go find, someone with wisdom, somebody from church or whatever. But I know there has been lots of times just from those friendships and people that we talk to will, they give you a little advice or just a couple of words here or there that really will sink in. But sometimes I think sometimes you'll get something on sitcoms and have a conversation start from that. So and seeing how they treat each other on the sitcoms, and we talk about how our conversation about how that's I can't imagine doing that. I was thinking of something specific, but it kind of went away. But
Yeah.
um,
Well, one thing I do pull out of that, right, that you keep bringing up that I think is key is you're not in it alone.
right,
Right? In both cases, whether it's going to find somebody at church seeking counseling or even listening to something else like a sitcom, like you said, regardless, it's always about seeing the help in others, right? It's we sometimes I think, especially as guys, we can kind of see it as weakness to ask for help. And that's not even just in marriage, right? Like, this is in business, out in public among friends and family. I even had somebody tell me once when I expressed that I was doing some counseling with my wife that culturally speaking, in some cases, that's considered weakness to even admit that. And I was blown away by it because I actually see it as it's strength, right? Because there is strength in numbers, and sometimes it takes a village to make things happen. I mean, we certainly believe in team building in business. Why wouldn't we see it the same way when it comes to marriage and parenting? So it comes out, right? Like the wisdom you're sharing is that we're not alone. We
right,
need each
for
other.
sure, definitely, definitely.
So what about parenting, right? You've got 6 grandkids and 3 adult children. The one question that comes to mind that I'd love to start on when it comes to parenting is what do we need to know, those of us who have younger children that are not yet adult children? What matters most in those younger, more formative years? That kind of sometimes we think that certain things matter more than they actually do. But you have adult children now, and so you've seen what you saw what you did when they were growing up, and now you see sort of the outcome, if you will. What really matters in those younger years that us younger couples should be thinking about during that time when our children are adults?
Definitely, I think time,
Uh,
it's irreplaceable. We didn't really do a lot of camping, but you keep thinking about all the times when you did go camping, how those memories seem to stick with you more than other stuff. But I think it's just spending time with them is so invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you don't ever get that back. Yeah, I
It's
think because that's the only time, whether it can even be when they're helping you do stuff. It's just such a key to their growth and key to your growth, and then the memories of that too. So
that stands out because it's not the first time I've heard that. I've heard that. And one of the things I like to do when I research things is I will sometimes on purpose look at both extremes and hear all the parts in between, because one thing I realize is no matter which way you look at a particular issue, there's usually a one or more common threads that run through it all. And this is one of them, right? When it comes to parenting, that I hear over and over again, is the time that we invest is one of the most important things in the earlier years. And I've even heard a lot that, you think that it matters less as they get older, but not really. Because I'll tell you what, I'm in my 40s. I don't have my dad anymore, but I always appreciate that time with my mom as well. Like I still get stuck in life. I still look to that leadership, that wisdom that comes from my parents. And so it's just invaluable. So I think you're on to something there, Joe. I appreciate you sharing that.
yeah.
All right. So question I like asking as we begin to wrap up: if you could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self and kind of have a do-over, what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
That's always difficult for me because I can't think since I've been through all this life, right? And go back my 20-year-old self, the only thing I think I would say is learn more and don't get stuck. I mean, as far as don't get stuck, like be a little more adventurous in some things, and then be more conservative in other things. And that's what I think I would say, about, because maybe one place I worked at too long, for example, or didn't, go out on a limb and start the business sooner, that kind of.
Yeah, taking risks rather than being so conservative that you don't even move forward at all.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I can think of countless times in just the past couple of decades where I made that same choice. You're right. Sometimes the biggest risks yield the biggest returns. And those returns, I think, don't always present themselves as wild successes in the way that we think of it, right? Sometimes it's huge failure, but from that failure is born this whole set of new opportunities, because you end up seeing the whole thing differently. You end up learning and gaining something from that you can now use going forward that you never would have had if you didn't go through it in the first place.
Right, for sure. Yeah.
That's good. So last thing, but before I say that, I just want to say thank you, Joe. Appreciate you spending the time with me and sharing your wisdom. This has been a great conversation. So thanks for being with me.
Well, thank you, Dave.
And so just to kind of wrap it up, what are the services that you provide and how can folks reach you?
So the biggest item is one-on-one coaching. And I'm willing to help anybody out, but it's so they can connect with me. And my website is joeminercoaching.com. And then also on Facebook is Joe Miner Coaching. And I think because if they go to the website, they can schedule a time with me. But and don't be afraid. Just if you want to talk to me for a half hour on Zoom, and whether it be to ask questions or you want talk about some problems, I'd be happy to share with you. It's I'm here to help is what I really want to tell people, right? So
absolutely. So Joe he's a generous guy, right? And he's going to give that time to you. So certainly encourage all of you listening to this, reach out to Joe, have a conversation, just see where it goes. So Joe, thank you again for being part of this and for once again for sharing your wisdom. For the rest of you listening, remember to lead well, live on purpose, and honor God with your life. Remember to subscribe if you're loving this podcast, and appreciate and love you all. Have a great one. Thank you once again for listening and supporting the No Purpose Without Love podcast. If you like what you've been hearing, please remember to follow this podcast to continue receiving notifications about new upcoming episodes. For more information about how to start your own purpose-filled journey or to get in touch with me, you can start my online course by going to courses.beaconleaders.com, or you can email me at info@beaconleaders.com. You can also visit my website at www.davideguerreso.com. I will post these links and others in the description section of each episode as well. So until next time, remember to lead well, live on purpose, and honor God with your life.